Round 8 of the 2017 Minibike British Championship came from Mildenhall on another wet afternoon in Suffolk, where riders were looking ahead to their final point-scoring opportunity before the final weekend of the campaign in Kettering. Atrocious weather conditions that reached a nadir halfway through the race programme meant not only a changeable surface from one moto to the next, but the time spent recovering the circuit eventually led to the curtailment of the final round of races altogether. That decision from the officials meant additional pressure placed on 2 pro races to determine the overalls at round 8, and a narrowed window of opportunity for points to be recovered by the riders trailing series leader Bradley Pocock. Before we take a look at the action in the British Championship category, here's a look at what happened in the support classes. The kids 50cc class was the only category restricted to just a single moto at round 8. Making it round the circuit in dry conditions a great enough challenge even for some of the top performers, let alone when the wettest weather came later in the day. The deciding race itself, though, was relatively straightforward, Harry Lee bursting into an immediate lead and, despite an early fall, never dropping out of top spot. Half a lap behind him, Ray Barrow and Ben Johnston again proved evenly matched, but Barrow held second place throughout and Johnston eventually dropped back with mechanical problems. Only the top 3 finished on the lead lap. Ben Johnston therefore classified third despite a slow final lap. The championship order was largely respected in the race, Ray Barrow's absence from earlier rounds in the season leaving him out of position in 8th, and the series podium is now starting to look decided. The 6th round win in 8 appearances for Harry Lee, now 112 points ahead of Ben Johnston, who looks settled in the runner-up place after his 3rd position finish at round 8. Louis Dutton put one hand on the trophy in the Youth 125cc Championship after his main series rival's retirement in the opening moto. Ewan Goddard attempted to recover from the back of the pack after stalling at the start, but retired from 12th position on the penultimate lap, leaving Dutton's race win to instantly double his championship advantage in the 12 to 14 age group. The race's early entertainment was produced by the efforts of Senna A. Summers, who took the 9 to 12 victory in the first moto and provided the race's only challenge to Louis Dutton. Summers held the lead early on before slipping behind Dutton, the pair separated by less than 2 seconds at the checkered flag. Leo Voles took 3rd position in the scratch race, conceding just 3 points to Summers that he made back as the day wore on, but he was made to work hard for the place by Alex Dutton, the pair also battling with the race's 12 to 14 runner-up James Lee. The second moto took place as the first race back after the rain break, leaving the youth riders effectively guinea pigs on a now smooth but deep and wet surface. That in itself threw up some surprises, with 2 of the top 3 in the points after the opening race, then missing out on the podium, and falls for several key riders. Problems for Senna A. Summers cost him class victory, as he had been running in 2nd position and set for a second batch of 25 points. James Lee was also in the wars, a lap down practically from the start and dropping off the 12 to 14 podium despite a 2nd place finish first time out. Sam Thompson was among the riders to take advantage, and his consistency was rewarded with a first podium finish of the campaign. Despite finishing a lap down in the 2nd moto, Senna A. Summers was able to notch 18 points that enabled him to take the runner-up position in the day's overall result, and concede just 1 point to a rider already well adrift in the championship standings. Summers' advantage was actually increased to nearest rival Harry Streeter, who finished 3rd. Jake Speller finishes 1st in class in the 2nd moto, but misses out on the podium by a point. The top 3 in the championship, also the top 3 at round 8, but with Summers restricted to 2nd. Meanwhile, in the 12 to 14 age group, Louis Dutton takes the biggest championship swing of the season with victory in both motos, while rival Ewan Goddard picks up points in just one of 2 outings and drops 55 points in arrears. Close scoring from the middle order riders, but James Lee already has a buffer to the rest of the pack from 3rd in the standings. In the day's overall, the closest spread in terms of points was in the chase for 3rd position. 4 riders separated by 3 points, with Callum Radford getting the verdict on countback after a tie with James Lee. Round 7 winner and championship leader Craig Rose got off to the perfect start at round 8 in Mildenhall, but on a day of attrition in the 110cc class, Series standings have only closed up further, with several riders still in contention. Rose was the dominant winner of the first moto, his main rivals all dropping points in challenging mixed conditions, but his retirement from the second race threw the championship wide open once again. Consistency has been the problem for all of Rose's rivals in 2017. As they've taken points from one another, the series leader's advantage from a double victory in Worcester has been maintained. Rose showed some of that class again in the first moto, pulling quickly clear of the chasing pack. A real group of evenly matched riders forming up behind the slower Pablo Becerra behind the top three runners. But his lap 3 fall, as well as dropping him to 11th, triggered a series of further position changes and the frantic racing that we've become accustomed to in 110cc category. That enabled Rose to break away for a comfortable victory up front, his rivals never able to close within 5 seconds of him. His Skinner had a disastrous day that looks to have ended his hopes of a series victory, just 14 points with a string of misfortune. He'd already recovered from one setback, moving to 5th after a lap 1 drama. After another fall, it was a question of mere damage limitation, the rider who set the fastest lap of the race only managing 7th. Instead, it was Elliot Gardner, 4th in the standings coming into round 8, who came closest to challenging Rose in the first moto. But after passing Harry Titterell on lap 2, he could only match the leader's pace and was unable to gain. Meanwhile, Jack Titterell, Rose's closest rival on points coming into round 8, was in what turned out to be a crucial ride in the first moto for 3rd, and worked his way diligently from the 7th position he held at the end of the opening lap. With 2 of Craig Rose's main rivals at least putting in a damage limitation ride in race 1, they were poised to pounce when he suffered some severe misfortune in the second moto. He wasn't the only one. Piers Skinner's disappointing day continued with a lap 1 retirement. Matt Holcomb, Matthew Pocock and Oscar Stern each making it no further than 1 lap more than him. But Rose's lap 4 breakdown was far more dramatic, as he had led comfortably and appeared set for an overall win that would have given him a 57-point championship lead. Instead, his retirement promoted Jack Titterell to 3rd, enough for 2nd in the overall, and to move just 30 points from top spot in the series standings. The highest scorer of the top trio is 3rd in the championship, while series leader Craig Rose dropped points to 3 of his 4 main rivals, leaving the 110cc category finely balanced. A second successive victory for Elliot Gardner certainly makes him the rider to watch in the remaining 2 rounds. 50 points may be a stretch, barring further misfortune for Craig Rose. A successful day for Harry Titterell with a place on the podium, but it's his brother Jack who remains closest to the series leader. Now lining up for the second and deciding moto in the 140cc category, a split grid race with the Masters and Veterans scoring points for their championship as well. But before we get underway with the action, here's what happened in race 1. Ashley Gorman has been the dominant force in the 140cc category in 2017, and a maximum score at round 7 only underlined the mammoth task his rivals have on their hands if they want to close from 52 points back. Gorman was headed for little more than a lap in the opening race at round 8, 6th off the line but already 3rd by the end of lap 1. And having then scythed his way efficiently through to the lead, he went on to amass a 14-second advantage to take a comfortable victory. The action behind him was far more entertaining. Dale Howard took top spot in the Masters category after a lap 1 pass on Liam Thomas, but his fight with Luke Humphrey went right to the finish, all over 2nd in the scratch race. Meanwhile, fellow Masters rider Leon Thomas, who had led the race on the opening lap, slipped gradually back into the tussles behind. By the final lap, he was under pressure from Troy Hayward, who had come through for 3rd in the 140cc category at the expense of Scott Joyner, having followed him for much of the race. Hayward then went on to overhaul Thomas on the final lap to take 4th in scratch. Ahead of the second race of the day then, championship leader Ashley Gorman leads the overall once again in the 140cc category. Luke Humphrey and Troy Hayward in provisional podium positions. Lee Mitchell and Christopher Rose will be the favourites in their respective Masters and Veteran categories. Cancellation of one of the 3 pro motos gives us an additional opportunity to focus in on the 140cc Masters and Veteran categories. Ashley Gorman, Dale Howard and Christopher Rose leading in their respective classes. Gorman, the pre-race favourite, winner first time out in the 140cc class, leads the points here ahead of Luke Humphrey and Troy Hayward. We are underway with this combined grid then, the 140cc Masters and Veterans. Down to the first turn, Lee Mitchell and Dale Howard away well, as is Ashley Gorman. First to the first turn is Lee Mitchell. Through now into second place comes Ashley Gorman, pushing aside Dale Howard, who's in third position, ahead of Scott Joyner and Luke Humphrey. A real pack of riders from third position down, but the top 2 starting to break away on the opening turns there. Good start from Mitchell and Howard, but for now the race lead is with Ashley Gorman, as going very, very wide further back down the order, and now getting into all sorts of difficulty, Dale Howard, and that releases Scott Joyner through into third position and challenging for second place, getting up the inside of Lee Mitchell, and Mitchell is relegated down to third position. Still the leader in class, of course, because of Dale Howard's trouble earlier in the lap. All of the riders finding conditions pretty tricky as the 2 Masters riders go toe-to-toe in the battle for third position on track. Obviously that's worth first in class. Ashley Gorman leading away in the scratch race, also obviously the 140cc leader, ahead of Scott Joyner in second place. Dropping back now, Dale Howard and Lee Mitchell involved in their own fight. You can see the sheer depth of the track at the moment as Ashley Gorman finds almost right up to the spokes the deep stuff as he works his way through the circuit, but so far so good for the current race leader, Ashley Gorman, the comfortable series leader in the 140cc category, who sits well clear of Luke Humphrey and Taylor Hampshire, nearest rivals in terms of the point standings. Hampshire sitting out this round, so Scott Joyner, who sits up in second position in this race, has an opportunity to move well clear of him in the championship standings. The 2 come into this race level, tied on points, as we see Joyner making his way through the opening turns to start once again back onto the portion of the circuit that these riders have already met. Of course, this race taking place after a massive rain shower as Luke Humphrey looks down at the machine, seems to be struggling there, the number 56, and that's going to enable a couple of the riders behind him, including Jason Gardner, to try and pull a move. So whether Humphrey is now back up to race pace remains to be seen, but some struggles earlier in the lap for him. Battles right the way through the order as we see them working their way through. Darren Griffiths there of the veteran category, just dropping a place to Mason Cockrell, who moves into 11th in the scratch race. We see a race at the moment for second and third positions. It's Scott Joyner holding P2, Lee Mitchell in third position. The gap between them was 1.5 seconds at the end of the opening lap. It's a lot less than that now as the Masters leader, Lee Mitchell, tries to put a bit of distance between himself and Dale Howard. Further back down the order, that's Troy Hayward. A disastrous opening lap for a rider who's been inconsistent. He's been involved in plenty of incidents in 2017. His outright pace, there's no denying that, as Ashley Gorman pulls up. Gorman is stationary on the circuit, on the infield portion of the circuit, trying to get the machine back started again. If he rejoins the track, you'd fancy he'd be able to gain back some positions, but for the moment, it doesn't look as though he's going to be able to. It's Scott Joyner who has picked up the race lead at his expense, ahead of Lee Mitchell in second position. Jason Gardner now coming through for third, ahead of Dale Howard, and Daniel Foreman rounds out the top 5, although Foreman right on the tail of Dale Howard, as we see Scott Joyner under real pressure now for the race lead. Lee Mitchell about a couple of tenths of a second faster on that previous lap. 1.5 seconds was the gap between the 2 of them, as Daniel Foreman now makes his way through onto the tail of Dale Howard. That's the battle for 4th position, so we've got a real race on for 2nd and 1st, and a real race on for 4th and 5th. Jason Gardner somewhat isolated there in 3rd position. Ashley Gorman back up and running, so good news for him. He's been relegated though down to 8th position, having lost over 30 seconds stationary on the infield on that previous lap, and that sets the rest of this race up quite nicely as Scott Joyner gets into trouble, and that's the race leader dropping out of the race lead. Lee Mitchell manages to get himself back going again, avoiding Scott Joyner, and our new race leader is also in top spot in the Masters category, all the while trying to open up his advantage over Dale Howard, who's 4th in the race, as we see Troy Hayward circulating down in 12th position. It's been an isolated race for him, a race of attrition here. We've seen problems earlier on for Ashley Gorman, and in the early stages for Luke Humphrey as well. Troy Hayward with his own misfortune on the opening lap. Battle going on for second, third and fourth positions. 3 riders promoted at the expense of Scott Joyner. Jason Gardner here just ahead of the fight between Dale Howard and Daniel Foreman. It's while Howard and Foreman have been battling amongst themselves over what was previously fourth position and now for third that Jason Gardner has been able to hold on. At the moment, he is the 140cc category leader. It's Lee Mitchell out in front, but he's the Masters leader, 16.7 seconds clear of Gardner in second position. Then it's Dale Howard, and Daniel Foreman is the second of the 140cc runners. Simon Voles third in terms of the 140cc category, but he is now under severe pressure as Ashley Gorman starts to gain on the pack. Mitchell out in front and well clear, and there goes Gorman down the inside of Jason Gardner, who had clearly already been passed by 2 riders, because Daniel Foreman is now ahead of him as well. So it's all change here as Ashley Gorman starts to find his way through back to the top positions. Daniel Foreman, who previously occupied 4th position, has dropped back behind, but he has gained a place as well on Jason Gardner. Whether Gorman will be able to get to Lee Mitchell out in front remains to be seen, but he was a whole 6 seconds faster than anyone else on lap number 3, and he is coming for the race leader. Ashley Gorman then, the rider in focus, the pre-race favourite, the winner first time out, looking set to take victory for a second time in the 140cc category. Whether he can get to the scratch race lead remains to be seen, but he's come through well at the expense of Daniel Foreman as he now passes Scott Joyner, who of course has dropped a lap in arrears already and will now drop another with Ashley Gorman coming through. So it's Lee Mitchell out in front, fairly comfortable in terms of the Masters class. This will be a good result for him. He's got ground to make up in the context of the championship compared to Dale Howard. Howard setting a new personal best on that previous lap. Luke Humphrey still circulating down in 9th position, so still inside the top 10. Actually 9th place at the moment is worth 5th position in the 140cc class. As further down the order we see Christopher Rose. Rose up in 7th position is the leader of the veteran category, and he's fighting here, and positions changing constantly. It's Rose at the moment who's got that 7th place, although it might not be for too much longer, as coming back through there at his expense is Dale Howard. So it's Mitchell who leads quite comfortably, over 4 seconds up on Ashley Gorman, but it's Gorman who is gaining ground all the time. Daniel Foreman sitting in 3rd position, Jason Gardner 4th, Dale Howard 5th. Then, as I said, Christopher Rose, who was 2.5 seconds behind him at the end of that previous lap, but it was much closer than that for a while until Christopher Rose lost a little bit of control, and now the focus returns to the battle for top spot, because Lee Mitchell has been losing ground at a rate of around 10 seconds a lap for the last few laps since Ashley Gorman lost a 30-second margin. Stationary on the infield, got the bike back going again, and is now all-out attack on Lee Mitchell. Lee Mitchell with a 2-minute 30.2 on the previous lap, 2-minute 12 for Ashley Gorman. So that 4 seconds won't last too long at all, and Gorman is now pegged right to the back of Lee Mitchell as they come through the infield section. Gorman has found his way through. Gorman up front then, Mitchell relegated to 2nd, Daniel Foreman in 3rd, is 2nd in the 140cc category, but he's over 5 seconds in arrears now of the new class leader. 3rd place in class in this race at the moment is with Jason Gardner, and as I was saying, in terms of the Masters category, Lee Mitchell looking good for the 25 race points. That'll make back some of the ground lost first time out. Dale Howard the winner in the opening race, but if Howard stays where he is in 2nd, it'll be another overall win for him, and his championship margin will remain largely intact. It stood at 24 points coming into this round number 8. Ashley Gorman through to complete another lap. A 2-minute 15 his time there. Lee Mitchell with a 2-minute 27 by comparison. So in just the space of a lap, he's already dropped 8 seconds behind the race leader. Ashley Gorman looking good enough to take the 140cc category and indeed the championship in 2017. He was already quite a significant margin up ahead of this round. 52 points clear of Luke Humphrey in 2nd. He's gained another 3 already this weekend in race number 1. Further back, Dale Howard having a tough race. The current 2nd place man in the Masters category in this 2nd moto, seemingly just nursing the machine home, one of only 2 runners in the Masters class at present, and albeit down the order in 6th position behind Christopher Rose at the moment in P5. There is Daniel Foreman. He's set for 3rd place in the race. That'll be 2nd in class, over 10 seconds back from Lee Mitchell, who sits in 2nd in the scratch race and will take top spot in the Masters. His nearest rival, Dale Howard, as I said, having been overtaken by Christopher Rose, the leader in the veteran class, and he's got almost a lapse advantage over his nearest rival in the veterans here today. Christopher Rose over 100 points up on his nearest rival in points terms in the Veteran Championship for 2017. And the way this race is going, it's serving to underline the various discrepancies between the leaders and the rest of the chasing pack in all of the classes. Aside from the Masters, of course, where it looks as though we're going to have a battle that goes right down to the final round, if not the final race of this 2017 campaign. Time ticking for any rival to try and close in on Ashley Gorman, but it doesn't look as though they're going to do it, and it should be the number 72 who will be home for the victory here. He comes around the final sequence of turns and on towards what has been an extremely impressive victory, all the more so for the fact that he had to recover 30 seconds. He had to come through from towards the back of the pack, and it's Ashley Gorman who wins in super style. 2 wins out of 2 in the 140cc category to put one hand on the trophy in class. Second over the line eventually will be Lee Mitchell, as Scott Joyner, 3 laps down, crosses the line in 16th position after his earlier misfortune. He was one of a few different race leaders we've had during this race, but unfortunately for him, he can only watch on as his rivals take the major points haul. Second over the line, Lee Mitchell, the leader in the Masters category. It's going to be close down to the line for 4th position, but Jason Gardner just holds on. That's enough for 3rd in the 140cc category for him. Christopher Rose comes over the line to take top spot in the veterans, and Dale Howard will be next over the line for 6th position in the race. So the results overall in the 140cc category: 50 race points for Ashley Gorman, moves him on to 531 points in the championship. Meanwhile, in the Masters category, it's a good result, 2nd time out for Lee Mitchell, but it only makes back some of the lost ground from the opening moto, and still the championship is in favour of Dale Howard, who came in 2nd in class there in 6th position. And in terms of the veterans, Christopher Rose, yet another unbeaten round as he moves 150 points clear at the top of the veteran standings. The opening Pro Moto at round 8 of the 2017 Minibike British Championship. The 2 favourites lining up, separated by just 1 rider. Bradley Pocock versus Frank Van Homet, the top 2 in the series standings. The whole shot king, Blaine Blackwell, has gone for the very outside of the starting grid here as the riders wait for the gate to drop and the first Pro Moto gets underway. Watch for Blackwell, who's made a good start from the outside. Frank Van Homet are way better than Bradley Pocock, who was on the inside of him but has been trapped on the inside there. It's Blackwell who leads, it's Van Homet in 2nd. A clear run to the first turn for Bradley Pocock as Dave Lamb goes down and he's collected by riders around him. A frustrating start for the rider who finished in 3rd position at round number 7 on the same circuit here at West Row, as out in front Frank Van Homet enjoys a better start to the day than he had yesterday, and he's chasing after Blaine Blackwell, who leads it. It's Blackwell ahead of Van Homet, Bradley Pocock in 3rd, the top 4 starting to break away from the rest of the pack. Frustration early on for Dave Lamb as Van Homet goes for the inside here on Blaine Blackwell. Blackwell holds firm, but Van Homet gets a good run out of the turn and through into the infield section. It's Frank Van Homet who now leads the way. Blaine Blackwell has all too often in 2017 made a good start only to go backwards, and that is what's happened here. Blaine Blackwell relegated to 2nd position. Bradley Pocock next in line to try and have a go. It's Dominic Foreman in 4th position. Further back down the order, Andrew Luke coming under some pressure there. But the race is on for 2nd place. Bradley Pocock gaining a huge amount of ground there off the hairpin. Tries to get across the front of Blaine Blackwell, who holds firm. Elbows out to muscle Pocock aside and hold on to 2nd position. While Pocock's being held back here by Blaine Blackwell, it's enabling Frank Van Homet to burst away up front. 1.5 seconds already. The gap in less than half a lap emerging Frank Van Homet out in front. Blaine Blackwell in second place. Bradley Pocock already looking for a way through as they come through the tunnel. It's Van Homet out in front, but the race is on for second position. Pocock now right on the tail of Blaine Blackwell, less than half a second between them. Pocock diving down to the inside. Blackwell gets a good run through there. Pocock seemingly struggling for pace at that point on the circuit, but he's going again down the inside in an attempt to move past Blaine Blackwell. Frank Van Homet leads it, and it's now Bradley Pocock up into second position. So we'll see how long he was held back behind Blaine Blackwell as the rain starts to fall here in Mildenhall. It's been mixed conditions all weekend, and this rain is coming down with quite some intensity, considering that the race started in dry conditions not much more than 2 minutes ago. Blackwell now under pressure from Dominic Foreman, looking up to the outside line on the hairpin. Blackwell already having dropped from first to third and dropped well back already from the top two as well. Foreman is building up his racing speed as the race goes on. Managed to clear the rest of the pack. Kevin Doolan, Andrew Luke, Jody Burton, Craig Newton, Matthew Chamberlain and Tyrone Tugwell rounding out the top 10. Luke versus Burton, the closest fight further down the order at the moment for 6th position. Blackwell then under pressure from Dominic Foreman, and you would expect as this race goes on for Frank Van Homet to come under some pressure from Bradley Pocock as well. A second place finish would be a decent result in fairness for Pocock, who now leads the championship standings by 51 points after a massive gain at round number 7. You really can see from ground level the ferocity with which this rain is coming down. Kevin Doolan up ahead of Jody Burton, who has now got the better of Andrew Luke. It's been a good start to this race for Kevin Doolan, who made an appearance here at round number 7 at West Road. Had a solid, if unspectacular, day at round 7, but he's got off to an excellent start at round 8. The front four clearly a class apart, running something like 6 or 7 seconds a lap faster than anyone else further down the order. It's Frank Van Homet who leads it. The rain coming down with more and more intensity with every passing turn, and this is going to make things very tricky now. The fastest lap of the race set on lap 2 by Frank Van Homet at 1:43.9. I'd be surprised if that is beaten in the remainder of this race, because the rain is starting to cause problems, certainly further down the order. Not so much for Frank Van Homet, who's looking comfortable out in front. 3 seconds clear of Bradley Pocock. Third place with Blaine Blackwell. 6.5 seconds now back from the leader. That's something to the tune of 4 seconds back from second position, and Dominic Foreman is trying to go with the pace of the lead duo, which is enabling him to gradually close on Blaine Blackwell. This is the closest he's been so far. Blackwell slips and slides on the inside line, building it up in the deeper stuff wider. It's Dominic Foreman. They're completely side by side as they come through the infield section. Foreman getting a good run. It's blocked for the moment by Blaine Blackwell, who has the inside. Foreman tries to cut back down the inside of him, but can't get there. Blackwell holding on valiantly then for the moment in third position. Dominic Foreman, who is now 9 seconds adrift of the leaders, looking for his first podium of 2017, which seems a surprise. He's down in 6th position in the series standings. He's shown on several occasions the pace to match the top 3 in the series standings, but not able to keep with them either in terms of outright pace or consistency at varying stages during this campaign. Closest Foreman has come, if I remember correctly, was towards the start of the season at the opening round in Doncaster, where he showed plenty of speed. Sebastian Kiergaard at that stage of the season also in the mix. It's Blaine Blackwell who really has stood out as the emerging star of 2017, keeping up in terms of the pace with Bradley Pocock and Frank Van Homet, but that hasn't been the case at this race so far, with Blaine Blackwell dropping away and under pressure from 4th position, which is held by Dominic Foreman. Frank Van Homet starting to come under some pressure now from Bradley Pocock, who in these conditions seems to have been able to gain a little bit of ground. He's an all-out rider, Bradley Pocock, no doubt about his ballsiness and gutsiness, and he's willing to stick it to Frank Van Homet here. Second place would be a good result for Pocock. He doesn't need to go risking it, chasing after the race leader Frank Van Homet, who lost 53 points at round 7 here at Mildenhall yesterday, but is fighting his way back with a race lead in this one. Second place to Bradley Pocock. Dominic Foreman has now got the better of Blaine Blackwell, who is trickling onto the infield section down in 4th position. It's the race for the top 4 positions that is most closely fought after. Further battles going on down the order. Jody Burton has now got the better of Kevin Doolan, and Andrew Luke is trying to go with, but well back from that tussle for the moment at least. And Doolan in turn has dropped quite swiftly back from Jody Burton, who has been the main rider to put himself forward as best of the rest effectively. He is 10 points down on Dominic Foreman in the series standings. Andrew Luke more consistent than both of them, sits in 5th in the championship coming into this round. As close as you like now between the top two. Frank Van Homert under assault from Bradley Pocock, who looks wider around the outside as they come through the tunnel section, and Pocock goes for a move down the inside. He's made the move stick and gets the better of Frank Van Homert through for the race lead. So I said that Bradley Pocock didn't need to risk it, but that's a 6-point swing now, as he was in line for 22 points for second. He's now in line for 25 for first, and it's against his main series rival, Frank Van Homert. Bradley Pocock the leader. Frank Van Homert, the early race leader after becoming the first rider to get the better of Blaine Blackwell. He sits in second place. Blackwell has been relegated to 4th position by Dominic Foreman. So Blackwell, who made the fastest start, clearly not enjoying the damp Mildenhall mud as he drops down to P4. Jody Burton and Kevin Doolan still ahead of Craig Newton, and Newton running on a similar pace to Andrew Luke and Tyrone Tugwell behind. Kevin Doolan, quite consistent pace being shown by him, and he actually gained ground on Jody Burton last lap around in the tussle for 5th position. So we've got a battle on our hands for 5th, but we've got quite close fights for both 1st and 3rd places that are taking our focus for the moment. As Dominic Foreman comes up on lap traffic, he sits in 3rd position. Blaine Blackwell there, the number 71, directly behind him, also going for the inside route. Interesting to look further back down the order as to where David Lamb is. He's only managed to recover to 18th position, so a bit of a disaster here in the opening Pro Moto for him. Frank Van Homert catching a back marker at just the wrong moment as we return to the tussle for 3rd position. Dominic Foreman ahead of Blaine Blackwell, seems to have consolidated 3rd place for the moment. Not much more than half a second between them though, and probably even less than that between the top two. Bradley Pocock versus Frank Van Homert, just a couple of bike lengths in it as Pocock tries to stretch his advantage down the straight, but it's Van Homert who seems to be gaining at this stage of the race. We're more than halfway through now, and Van Homert is on a charge. He knows that he's got to beat Bradley Pocock consistently. Pocock has often had the pace advantage in 2017. Van Homert has been the more consistent, but now that he's dropped a huge amount of ground after retirements at round number 7, he really has to fight back in this one. He goes for the inside lunge. Pocock has the line and the advantage for the moment, but it's Bradley Pocock of East Sussex who is under real pressure here from Dutchman Frank Van Homert, who is throwing everything at him. Blaine Blackwell looks as though he's recovered to 3rd position here, ahead of Dominic Foreman. So what happened to Dominic Foreman, because he's dropped well back as well from Blaine Blackwell, who has recovered 3rd place. He sat in the race lead early on, dropped to 4th, is now back in P3. Crucial in terms of the podium, but important in terms of the championship as well, as Bradley Pocock gets held up slightly by a back marker. Frank Van Homert comes diving down the inside line. Can he make the move stick? Yes, he can. He got a much better run through the undulating home straight and manages to overcome Bradley Pocock, who's back down to P2. Will Pocock have the answer to recover the place once again? David Lamb has gone down. Lamb, who was already out of contention for the top positions but had recovered to 16th place, finds the bike in the mud once again. And surely that's an end to a miserable race for him. Even if he does come round, he was already 2 laps adrift of the leaders. It's only going to get worse from there. Frank Van Homert himself negotiating lap traffic through. He comes down at the inside as we have all of the runners now right the way up towards 5th position, coming in more or less a lap behind. Not quite in the case of Jody Burton or Kevin Doolan, but I think that was Matthew Chamberlain for 10th place who was being lapped there. So right the way up into the top 10 now, we have lapped runners. Certainly Dominic Foreman in 4th position, 12 seconds a lap faster than the nearest rider behind him, who is Jody Burton, who, as I said, at the moment is clocking up a lap down. Matthew Chamberlain is the first of the lap runners so far on this lap. We're still waiting for Burton to come through to complete the 7th lap of the race. The riders not getting quite as much lapping done as they might do in dry conditions in terms of complete laps, of course, because they're running at a slower pace. So it's Bradley Pocock who at the moment is in 2nd place and seems to have settled for that position behind Frank Van Homert out in front. This will be a good result, a confidence booster as well for Van Homert after the Seesaw Championship battle seemed to slide in favour of Bradley Pocock, unbeaten through round number 7, but it's round 8 that's going to get off to the perfect start for Frank van Homert as they come through now to lap Andrew Luke on the number 18 bike in 8th position. Frank van Homert, not a particularly sizable margin, but he will take the first moto at round number 8 of the 2017 Minibike British Championship. Riders struggling to make it up the hill further back. Dominic Foreman holding on for 3rd place, and Blaine Blackwell has stopped coming up the hill. Blackwell on the number 71 bike, it's smoking and it doesn't seem to be going anywhere at all, and this could signal retirement for Blaine Blackwell, because if he can't get to the finish he is out of the action, and that indeed is the way it stacks down. Frank van Homert the winner ahead of Bradley Pocock in 2nd, Dominic Foreman in 3rd, a somewhat fortuitous 4th position for Kevin Doolan, and David Lamb will inherit 12th position as they come down towards the checkered flag. Disaster for Blaine Blackwell in the opening moto, having run in 1st in the early stages. The second Pro Moto is now the final race of the day at round 8 of the 2017 Minibike British Championship. Frank van Homert leads the way at the halfway mark after scoring 25 points and the race victory first time out. A good recovery from disappointment at round number 7. He leads by 3 points ahead of Bradley Pocock. Dominic Foreman took 3rd place first time out after the retirement of Blaine Blackwell, who realistically is out of contention for a podium place in this round number 8, but still sits 3rd in the championship overall and will be hoping to make back some of the lost ground from the opening moto. 4 favourites lining up in the 4 outside starting positions after Blaine Blackwell's excellent getaway from the outside first time out. He hasn't made such a good one this time around. It's Dominic Foreman who makes it from the very outside. Blackwell then was trapped between van Homert and Foreman. He drops down to 3rd position. Bradley Pocock in 4th place. And just behind Jody Burton in P5. We've got a faller further back down the order, but in terms of the top 4, it's the top 4 you'd expect, not necessarily in the order you'd anticipate. Bradley Pocock finding a way to push through at the expense of Blaine Blackwell. Now goes up to the outside line to try and challenge for 2nd place. Comes thundering down the inside of Frank van Homert. The Dutchman holds firm. Pocock has his front wheel alongside, slides into the infield section and pushes van Homert down to 3rd position. Foreman now leading ahead of Bradley Pocock in 2nd. Frank van Homert will hope to quickly fight back. He goes in later, he goes in deeper, and he ends up in the deep stuff. Down goes Frank van Homert. He wrestles the machine back up onto 2 wheels, but that won't have done the bike any good at all, falling into that dirt. And we know how thick and deep that stuff is after the rainfall that we saw in the opening moto. That's what's left the track conditions as they are. A dry line starting to develop, and at the moment it's Dominic Foreman who's taking advantage of it out in front. Bradley Pocock 1.8 seconds in arrears in 2nd place. Blaine Blackwell in 3rd, and Frank van Homert having to work his way through from down in 8th position, but already the Dutchman up into 5th place and on the tail of Jody Burton, who sits in that 4th position. The front 3 have broken well clear, as you'd expect. 5 seconds the gap between Blaine Blackwell in 3rd and 4th position, as bundling around the outside comes Bradley Pocock. Now, he made a similar move a lap ago on Frank van Homert, but this one was even easier on Dominic Foreman. He's come from almost 2 seconds back, reeled in the early race leader, fires himself up to the outside line on the hairpin, and then zips down to what is the outside of the hairpin, but the inside of the next turn, and another well-worked move from Bradley Pocock, who's now come from 4th to 1st, and that's Blaine Blackwell, stationary, and Blaine Blackwell is dropping down the field. That's Kevin Doolan who comes through in 9th position. Well, he's up to 8th place now, because Blaine Blackwell, who sat in 3rd place, is out of the running. So Dominic Foreman looking good here in 2nd place for a position on the podium. It would be his first podium finish of the 2017 campaign. Of course, he's finished up in the top 3 in races previously. He's never strung together a successful round this season. This could be the first. He had a good performance in the opening round of the campaign in Doncaster, but not quite enough to make it into the top 3 overall. And perhaps Mildenhall could be the lucky venue for Dominic Foreman, who at the moment also stands to gain in points on Frank van Homert. That's real frustration for Blaine Blackwell, because in the context of the championship, he sat in 3rd position in the series standings, not too far behind Frank van Homert coming into round 8, dropped back in the opening race with a retirement, and looks set for another retirement in race number 2. So it's Bradley Pocock who leads a third of the way through this race. He's not going to have it all his own way. Dominic Foreman closing last lap around, trying to bring himself back into contention. Frank Van Homet well adrift here of the top two, and Jody Burton 13 seconds back from Van Homet in fourth position. The fight for fifth still going on, and that's intensifying, if anything. Craig Newton dropping back into the path of David Lamb, and Kevin Doolan under some pressure from Adam Frierson still in the race for seventh. Pocock making his way through the infield section ahead of Dominic Foreman, but again, Foreman looks like he's right on the pace of Pocock here, and even if Pocock's main championship rival Frank Van Homet can't be with him, it's Dominic Foreman who is keeping him honest. Even if he stays in second position, this will be good enough for a first podium finish of the campaign for Dominic Foreman. As they come into the hairpin and down towards the final sequence of turns, it's Bradley Pocock who looks set for the 25 race points. This will move him onto 47 at round number 8 and victorious ahead of Frank Van Homet, who would have a first and a third. Dominic Foreman with a third and a second would be third overall. So aside from Frank Van Homet and Bradley Pocock, neither of the top two positions would change. Jody Burton coming round in fourth place ahead of Newton, Lamb and Doolan, who are all still in the mix in terms of qualification positions. And Frank Van Homet has pulled up, so Jody Burton has actually come through there in third position, because Frank Van Homet, that's on the exit of the infield section. That explains why Jody Burton was next round. That's David Lamb there, so he has gained a place as well. And Frank Van Homet, well, what a weekend of utter misery for the reigning champion, who surely sees his hopes of retaining that title evaporate at the expense of Bradley Pocock, who is going to have dropped just 3 points in 5 races through round 7 and 8 to see a championship deficit turn into a massive championship advantage. Bradley Pocock, if he can keep things going, that's by no means certain. Each lap around there, he struggled to get the bike driving forward at that particular point in the circuit, but at the moment it's been fairly plain sailing for Bradley Pocock, and just to rub into the wounds of Frank Van Homet, he sees himself go a lap down, and Bradley Pocock pull clear. Oh, and that's Dominic Foreman. Foreman is out of the race. I can't believe this. We saw Blaine Blackwell pulling up earlier on in the race. He's still circulating, but a lap down. We've seen Bradley Pocock roar away towards victory at the expense of Frank Van Homet, and now we see Dominic Foreman, who is the only rider keeping Pocock honest in this race, pull off to the side of the racetrack. Well, Bradley Pocock is going to be completely untroubled now. There is Blaine Blackwell. He is coming up to the tail of David Lamb, who now sits in fourth position in this race. That's Craig Newton, who's down in sixth place. Kevin Doolan also in the mix, but further back behind Newton at the moment. So Pocock out in front, but the race is well back further down the field. Jody Burton in isolated second place. Blaine Blackwell has now recovered to third, but whether he'll be able to get to Jody Burton, who, well, we've often seen Burton has a bit of a gap behind him to the rest of the field. He is quite a capable runner around the 5th, 6th place marker normally. He's going to pick up a second place finish in this one, but shouldn't be able to challenge for the podium places after not a particularly inspiring result first time out. Further back, Blaine Blackwell with another good lap there in third position. Bradley Pocock really has eased up the pace, and Blackwell is gaining on both of the two riders up ahead of him. 13 seconds he cut back on Jody Burton last time around. There's Kevin Doolan at the moment in 5th or 6th position. It's hard to keep a track of where the riders are now. They've swapped and changed with retirements and everything else so much. It's Pocock, Burton and Blackwell who are the top three, and they've got over a minute separating them, so it's no surprise that Pocock has eased up the pace. The fastest rider on the track at the moment is Blaine Blackwell in third, but he's 10 seconds back from Jody Burton. I'm not sure he's going to have time to get there. He will make back up some ground. Lost to Frank Van Homet after the opening race. Of course, Blaine Blackwell retiring from the opening moto, but having picked himself back up and come round towards the finish, he should be able to claim some revenge on Frank Van Homet, who suffered a retirement of his own in this one, race number 2. So as Bradley Pocock comes through to take the checkered flag and a second successive win, it's commiserations for Frank Van Homet. A real disappointment for him. After a strong start to the day with victory in the opening moto, he retires from the second. It's a third retirement in 2 rounds, and meanwhile it's Bradley Pocock, his main championship rival, who has capitalised to maximum extent Aside from one defeat at the hands of Frank van Homert, it's been one-way traffic for Bradley Pocock in Mildenhall. The battle for second place is going to go down to the wire here between Blaine Blackwell and Jody Burton, but well adrift of Bradley Pocock, over 50 seconds in arrears in the end of Bradley Pocock, and that's despite a slower final lap from Pocock. Blaine Blackwell cutting through on the inside there of Jody Burton, through for second place. Burton tries to repay the compliment down the inside, but it doesn't look as though he's going to get there. Blackwell with a damage limitation right then to come home in second place. Behind Jody Burton in third, it'll be David Lamb eventually in fourth position, but Lamb is something like half a minute behind second and third places. Here comes David Lamb through the hairpin. He's ahead of Craig Newton, who in turn is getting the better of Kevin Doolan, but Doolan had the higher points total first time out, so may well still make the podium here. It'll take a little bit of mental mathematics to work that out as Doolan comes through off the hairpin. He's still got Craig Newton in sight. It's Pocock then who wins it. Blaine Blackwell in second place for 22, but that will be his final tally here today. Jody Burton in third position, ahead of David Lamb and Craig Newton, who round out the top five in the second moto. And in terms of the overall result, it's Bradley Pocock who takes the victory, but a surprise look to the remaining two places on the podium after retirements for Frank van Homert, Blaine Blackwell and Dominic Foreman. It's Kevin Doolan and Craig Newton who step onto the blocks for the first time in 2017.
Well, I'm a very poor sand rider, to be honest, and it got real wet, which is survival of the fittest, and I was quite happy to finish where I did, to be honest, in the first race. And the second race was a bit hard going, but again, you've got to finish them races.
Yesterday, round 7, I was doing okay and getting good results, but I had a couple of mechanical issues. But today we had a wet and slippery track, and that probably suited me a little bit. I was able to charge through and have me feet out in pretty unconventional style, but no, it was good. I enjoyed it.
I haven't actually looked at the results completely, but I think it's about a 70-point lead now in the championship, which is really good coming into it, 2 points behind. I know there were some issues with Frank's bike, but sometimes you've got to take the good from the bad, so it's benefited me. So I mean, but nonetheless, the first day I made it happen. I was in the lead before any bike problems happened to Frank, so I was there able to win it. But I took 3 wins yesterday, a second and a first today. It's almost a perfect weekend, really, so I'm more than happy.
A weekend of surprises here in Mildenhall, and this is how the championship standings look ahead of the final 2 rounds of the 2017 campaign. Bradley Pocock now comfortably out in front, a battle developing over second between Frank van Homert and Blaine Blackwell, both of whom had their problems this weekend. They will hope to recover lost ground at the final 2 rounds of the 2017 campaign at Kettering in September.